Thank you, Missy. Nice to have a fellow social worker in the group. Nice to meet you here. Good question about how to use LinkedIn in the era of COVID. Yeah, great question. Okay, it's not. Also, it's not a fully it's not a full session on LinkedIn. I know that you could easily do a 20-minute session on LinkedIn alone. So I'll spend some time talking about LinkedIn if you'd like to hear about that. Good question, Pradyumna. Yeah, we're going to talk about that. And the question is, I'm not sure if everybody can see the chat. The questions were about LinkedIn, how we can go above and beyond just sending connect requests. And the other is, given that coffee chats and informal interviews are going to look different in the future, what can we do to replace those? That's exactly what we're going to talk about today. Great. Okay, so we'll get started. And if anybody else wants to type at any time during the session today, please feel free to type if there's something specific that you want to address that I'm not addressing. And I'll try to get to everybody's requests today. So my name is Lindsey Hepburn. I'm the director of Careerscape Counselling and Education, which is a private practice. I have a private practice in Toronto, and I work with people in career transition. And some people are employed and looking at different opportunities or looking to make a different a career change. And other people are in between opportunities. That's how I like to call job searching. You're in between opportunities and looking to connect to their next opportunity, looking to connect to a new kind of role. So I work with basically a lot of different. Thank you, Jesse, for saying that. So if you're having difficulty reading the slides, click twice on the presentation to make the screen a little bit bigger. I think just based on what I've said, what I've seen in the other sessions, they're still going to be a little bit small, but hopefully you'll be able to get the gist of things. And I'll be speaking to the slides anyways, so you're not going to be missing much if you're having trouble seeing those slides. So, COVID-19 has obviously presented us with a whole host of different challenges, and job searching and networking is one of the many things that have changed during this time period. And we really you keep hearing the word unprecedented times, because really these are times without precedent. We've just never experienced anything like this. Not a lot of people were alive for the pandemic 100 years ago. So, most people have never experienced a global pandemic before, and it's really altered the way that we are doing everything. And some things also never change. We've seen in the last 5 months that the desire for human connection is as strong as ever. And there was nothing like telling people that they were not supposed to see anybody outside of their own bubble, to remind us of how strong the need for human connection is. Networking really is about human connection. I always tell people that, and I really like what Vicki Saunders says. She's the founder of SheEO, which is a global network for entrepreneurs. And Vicki says networking is as simple and straightforward as talking to your neighbor. So, it's about reframing this activity too. Networking is about finding a job, yes, but it's really at the core of it. It's about making human connections. It's about getting to know people. It's about being interested and curious about what someone does. So even though the times are drastically different, remind ourselves and let's not lose sight of the core of this activity, which is getting to know people and understanding more about what it is that they do, where they do it, how they've gotten to be where they are. So I really like to reframe the networking activity altogether for my clients in my practice. And I say to look at networking as a community building activity. So networking, just like my colleague in the last session, Taranam Khan, said, networking is something that you're doing all the time. It's not just something that you're doing when you're job searching. It's something that you're doing when you're talking to your neighbor. It's something that you're doing when you're talking to your uncle on the phone. It's something that you're doing when you're talking to your family. It's about being curious about what people do, and it's about getting people interested and curious in what you're interested in doing too. And you may not know what it is that you're interested and curious in doing. So this is all an exploratory activity that happens in relationship with other people. As soon as you bring this out of the woodwork, as soon as you bring this out of isolation, which is, this sense that we're supposed to have our careers all figured out on our own. This isn't really how human relationships work. We learn from each other. We learn in relationship, and job finding and job hunting is actually no different. So obviously we are in a different time period for our relationships. This is the biggest challenge that we're facing, is how to have relationships with people that aren't in person. We thankfully have technologies now that can support this. And I think we've all learned in the last 5 months that just having relationships online is not the same. It's not the same as doing it in person. It can be draining to have all of your relationships online. It can be tiring. So it's good just to take note of that. You've moved the networking activity entirely online. For the most part, you've moved it entirely online. And to notice when you're getting tired, that's a really important thing to notice so that you can take stock. This is networking now for a job is going to be more tiring than it has been before. For instance, I'd love to all be meeting you in person today. I'm really energized by being in a group of people and answering your questions in person. But that's just not the world that we're living in. So I want to just also, note that this event in and of itself is the practice of using different kinds of platforms to still engage in some of the regular activities that we're used to. It has a different quality to it. It has a different feeling to it, but we are going to do our best. So the key is thinking about the community that you already have available to you. And I will talk about LinkedIn and how to use social networking and everything, but I also do want to bring it back. The people that are your most important connectors, I call them connectors. These are people that care about you. They would care about you looking for a job. You care about them, and they're your main connectors. And that's who you're talking about in your inner circle. That's your friends and your family and your community of people that you have met through different events that you've been a part of. And most likely it was pre-COVID, because mostly those kinds of connections are really established. They can mostly be established in person. So you want to be thinking through, for instance, who are people that you've met that are interesting to you, that you'd like to learn more about, who would remember who you are, that you can reach out to. So those are the kinds of connectors that we're talking about. One of the things that my clients have had a lot of success with is also just posting on Facebook. And it's a very vulnerable thing to do. I'm not saying like this is easy. It's a very vulnerable thing to do, to post up for your friends and family that you're looking for a job. Yeah, that's a vulnerable thing to do. So I want to also affirm that that's vulnerable, and to say when you feel comfortable, do it anyway, because your friends and your family are the ones who are going to be the most supportive of you trying to find another job. Sometimes that's going to mean actually connecting you to a job. Other times that's just going to mean very helpful emotional and mental supports for this process, which is a very important part of the process. So, yeah, so a piece of this is, and I'm just not going to spend too long on this, but just take stock of where you're at with the job search. This is very important. So know where you're at. Are you in an exploratory phase? Are you trying to figure out still what kind of job you'd like to do? Or are you know exactly what kind of job you'd like to do, and you're just looking for people that can help you connect to those jobs? Those are two pockets, I would say, very different pockets of being in the networking phase. And you can be networking in both of those pockets, but it looks different. So in one pocket where you're in career exploration phase, you're asking curious questions. I've always been interested in being a social worker. Can you tell me a little bit about what a social worker does? Or, my uncle was in the culinary industry and I'm really interested in getting into it myself, but I don't know that much about it. Can you tell me what it's like to run your own kitchen? You're not dedicated to running your own kitchen, but you want to kind of explore the possibilities. So this is one pocket. This is a good career counseling pocket, because you're still exploring, you haven't narrowed down the search, you probably want to get some help with it. So that's a good pocket for career counseling. Directed job search is like, you know exactly what you want to be doing. This is a targeted search. You are reaching out to contacts that are within organizations that you'd like to work for. And you're tailoring all of your resume and LinkedIn to a specific job title. This, of course, is always a more effective way of finding a job, because you have a very directed search, you know what you're looking for. So this is good to know where you're at before you get into the networking conversations, because you know what kinds of questions to be asking. So how can you make, and this kind of gets back to one of the questions that one of our participants was asking earlier, how can you go above and beyond in the COVID era, when you're not going to be seeing people in person for a coffee chat? It's harder to get in people's faces because there's not a lot of like in-person events that we can be at together. So how can networking still be a personalized activity in the COVID era? And I think that the main thing is really to share where you're at. You know, this is what makes a personal connection, is that you know, share authentically where it is that you're at, whether you're exploring careers for the first time, maybe not the first time, but you're exploring making a career transition, or whether you're at that point where you have been in this field for 10 years and you're just looking for your next role. The more personalized this messaging can be for the people that you're connecting with, including the more personalized the messaging is in general on your feed, the more connected people are going to feel to you and to your story. And people, if they feel more connected to you and your story, they're going to be looking out for you. They're going to be wanting to help you. So the more personal you can be about what your experience has been, the better. That is above and beyond. It is a way that you can show people that you're comfortable sharing of yourself. So another element of this is that we need to focus in these conversations on what we have in common, which is this experience of COVID. You know, that this is a really hard time for everybody, whatever side of the conversation you're on. This has likely been a tough time for people. So, you know what, it's a really rare thing to find when you're reaching out to somebody who you don't know, that you already know you have something in common. Actually, you have this experience of a global pandemic in common. It's not the nicest thing to share in common with somebody, but you know what kinds of questions to ask. And people are also aware of like what kinds of employment circumstances people are facing too. So this is also a way of connecting globally what's taking place with what you're personally experiencing, and that's very important. And what the person that you're connecting with may also be, and likely is also experiencing, whether they're working from home or contemplating, going to work in an environment which is still in the COVID era, which is still in environments that we need to be careful and vigilant in. So that's something to include when you're reaching out to people. That's one of those ways that you can go above and beyond when you're actually reaching out to make connections with people. And I see Diana saying something, give more than you get. And that's such a great point in these conversations. Focus on you, focus on what's happening, but also empathize with what the other person might be going through, right? What are the working conditions like for them right now? If you don't get a response right away from somebody, especially now, don't take it personally. You don't know really how people are experiencing this, and you probably know whatever it is that it's challenging. So, to give empathy, give a lot of space for people to respond, and time. So in terms of using social media effectively, the use of social media is basically, I think our colleague did a fantastic presentation. The part that I saw, Laura Hartnell's presentation on LinkedIn, was fantastic. This is not a pure presentation on LinkedIn, but I did want to touch down on just some ways that you can use LinkedIn, because it's one of those virtual platforms now that we have available to us, to really seek out the organizations and the companies that interest you, that you want to work for, and try it as much as possible to find someone in that organization who's on LinkedIn who you can connect with, and just to reach out to them, do the things that we've been talking about, empathize with their experience, ask them about how things are going, talk a little bit about your experience, and then just ask if they can have a chat, you know. I think that because we are all aware of some of the situations that people are in, I think people are more open to having chats. I've found working with my clients that people are more open actually to having chats. It may not be on the phone. It may just be, an actual virtual chat, but I find that that there's actually more openness to doing that and more openness to helping people right now. So don't be discouraged about that. Keep trying. If somebody doesn't get back to you, try somebody else. And the idea in using, especially particularly LinkedIn, to reach out to people that you don't have any connections with. There's no sort of one of your 6 connections. The real key to using that effectively is to make sure that your keywords obviously are all there, but it's really, really about following the people that interest you, who is working for these organizations that you want to work for, who also just has a profile that they've had a career trajectory that you're like, how did they do that? I'm really curious about this person. And the more authentic your interest is in this person, the more likely it is that you're going to get a response, because when you're curious about someone else's experience, they're going to want to talk to you about it. So that's the main thing that's how you go above and beyond on LinkedIn. Don't get distracted by it being a technological platform, by it being a search engine. It effectively is just to make human relationships. It's another platform for relating to humans, so remember that it's actually still relating human to human. People really love when you're curious about what their experiences have been, and they're going to want to share those experiences if you're asking those questions. It's a great question about whether there's other options for LinkedIn, for professional networking other than LinkedIn. There are other options, but I really think LinkedIn, because that's where the majority of people are located. I think that that's the power of LinkedIn. That's like what makes it such a great professional networking tool, is that there's so many industries that are covered by LinkedIn. So I think that if you're talking very broadly, and yes, absolutely, professional associations and schools, definitely. And also just getting back to what we were talking about before, consider first people that you have had in-person contact with pre-COVID, okay, that you could possibly reach out to, find an email address, somebody that's going to remember what it was like to meet you in person, or maybe they don't, but you remember enough of what your in-person exchange was that you could remind them in an email. So that's going to be your most effective strategy here, is taking a look at who the most immediate circles are, and then working your way out, and then establishing brand new connections in the time of COVID, whether it's on LinkedIn. You're going to have to really work at making that personalized connection, at really work a little bit harder than usual at personalizing your story. So I know that we're running out of time, and I just want to say that networking in the COVID era, certainly like everything, is it's different. And just to take note, if it's like, if it's more exhausting than usual, it is more exhausting than usual, because we are people who like to, we're social beings. We are more energized by people in person. So take note and take care of yourself accordingly. Mentally check yourself. If people aren't getting back to you, job hunting is hard anyways. It's extra hard during COVID. So just check that you're, if you're starting to take things really personally, just take a break for a bit. Reach out to friends and family, not just for support, but really talk to them about what's happening with your job search. Try to stay as positive as possible. There's a lot of stuff out there that's not affirming about the job market. Don't read it. I know that there's a lot of jobs that are still coming up out there. I see them every day. My clients have had some success getting jobs in the last 5 months. So I know that there's a lot of bad news that you can be reading about the job market too. Don't read it. Put the good news in your mind about the possibilities, about the jobs that do exist. Take care of your mental health. Research people that inspire you, because that's going to be energizing. That's going to make you want to, be a learner and not just a job seeker. And that's always a recipe for success. Follow people that you like on social media. Be vulnerable. Post up about what you're going through on your own platform. Think of the long game. Job hunting can be a little bit of a slow process, so take it a day at a time. Think about it as community building. A community lasts you for a long time, right? A community is not something short. And take stock of where you're at. Are you in the exploratory phase? Do you want to get some extra support with sort of locating specifically what kinds of areas you'd like to be in, or is this a targeted job search? That's really going to help you become less frustrated if you can orient yourself to where you're at. And of course, I always say this, and this is the logo for my business, is we don't do this alone, and you're not alone. We seek, we are social beings. And so you can't be expected to do that by yourself. Make sure that you're locating people who can support you. And that's the session. And I think I answered some of the questions here that people have. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining me today for the session. I hope that you learned something. I also wish you all the best with your current job search. And yeah, I just appreciate also the organizers. Thank you so much to Mark Blaish for hosting this, for bringing TorontoJobs.ca online, which I think is such a great opportunity for networking. I hope everybody does enjoy the networking sessions later. I'm sure I already learned a lot from my colleagues and peers in the sessions, and hope to see you. Thank you so much for joining me, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. And take good care of yourselves. Thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day. Bye for now.